We are live on YouTube.
All right. Welcome, everybody. It's House Energy and Digital Infrastructure. And we are learning today about state data management and sharing policies. And we're going to learn about this, how the Secretary of State's office handles this issue. I'm Rep. Kathleen James from Manchester.
Richard Bailey, Memorial 2. Chris Morrow in the Windsor.
Michael Southworth, Caledonia too.
Christopher Howland, Robin Thor.
Dara Torrey, Washington.
Greg Butler, their team.
And Scott Campbell from St. Johnsbury.
Jack Locker, Committee Assistant.
All right. And we'll try to leave the door open for the cross breeze unless it gets okay. So, all right. For the record,
my name is Lauren Hibbert. I am the Deputy Secretary of State, and I really appreciate you all inviting me here to talk about how we handle data at the Secretary of State. Our first and foremost goal is to make as much information as we can transparent and accessible. So we do that in a multitude of ways. But my understanding was really that you wanted to know how we do that through our systems, and then how we're contemplating using data feeds, how we use them now or how we plan to use them in the future. If you have any questions or if I misunderstand the ask, just let me know and I'm happy to answer any questions. So
great.
We have 5 major systems that have publicly facing information. The first is our business services system with all our business entities in the state, including nonprofits, LLCs, all of sole proprietors, all of them. We have our elections systems. There are 3 of those. We have our election management system, our lobbying system, and our campaign finance system. And then we have our Office of Professional Regulation, which has all of our licensing information in it. So for all of those systems, you can look up a specific business or a specific lobbyist or a specific voter or specific professional, right? And all of those systems also have the ability to download reports related to certain areas. And I can talk about those areas if you'd like, but you can download a specific report as a user. We also have data that feeds either into our website or a partner service. So those are in Basara. We have our proposed administrative rules. Those feed onto our website. And then we also have data that feeds into LexisNexis after rules are adopted. That is how the state publishes its administrative rules.
Okay, I have my first question. All right, so for the first 3, obviously I understand that I've been on those sites. So that is fully public information. It is fully searchable. Folks can download records and reports. And that is the heart of your work, all of that public data. Okay. And then data that feeds into a website or a partner service. I don't know what Basara is.
Oh, that's the Vermont State Records and Archives Administration.
Okay.
Sorry. So that's our 4th major external branch of our office. We have about 20 people. We manage all records, digital and non. For the state of Vermont, we provide records retention schedules. We are getting involved with ADS when we're standing up systems to make sure that when I'm tailoring my description of them to your committee, but I wanted to let you know that, anytime that a new system is being created, new records are being created. And so we are now part of the IT ABC form process and part of the contracting process, so that as agencies are creating new systems, they're contemplating records retention, contemplating how they're creating records and how they're going to maintain records in their systems, how they're going to come out of their systems if they need to at all, if the system's not the system of record, which is a records management term, and if they're going to come out of the system, how they're going to come into the state database of records, some of which are digital, and we have a warehouse that is full of records, really important records like Vermont's Constitution. The original is in Middlesex. So that is the Vermont Records and Archives Administration. They do a small piece of their work is administrative rulemaking, which is all agencies have the ability to do rulemaking to help implement the statutes that you all pass. It's a really, really important piece of state government. There's a whole process for that. They help agencies the ICAR, which is the Interagency Committee on Rules, and LCAR, which is the Legislative Committee on Rules. And the public is able to provide comment on rules and do so through this public portal on rulemaking. They can find the proposed rules, which agencies are proposing them, and then know how to provide public comment for the rules.
Okay, so so there's the physical archives, which I know I've learned about before, that's really interesting. And then you also have a digital archives, and some of this, I would imagine anything that can be digitally fed is at this point digitally fed.
Yes, and and it becomes even more, SharePoint records and OneDrive records and records that are on websites that are being decommissioned. It's actually fairly technical and complicated, the digital piece of records.
Okay. So all the,
And expensive, just so you all know, sometimes sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's okay.
Madam Chair. Sometimes people think digital is cheaper than physical, but it is not always accurate. And it's also, when you talk about the expense of keeping records, you also have to think about the expense of releasing those records. So all of that record management is really important and critical.
And then once the rules are adopted, they're fed to LexisNexis.
Correct. And both of those feeds are relatively manual at this time.
Okay.
Then we also have the election results archive, where we can see election results over a multitude of years, I think all the way back until the 1800s. And that is data that is fed into a third-party site that is accessible on our website, but is maintained by a third party.
Okay. So it's feeding through a third-party site, but then back up on your website.
And then I thought this committee would be particularly interested in that in the OPR bill, really there because that's our vehicle for it. We are asking for authority to charge third-party entities for data feeds. Where we're doing that is we're modifying 3 VSA 118. This was passed by the House, adding section C, which says the Secretary of State shall have the authority to collect and deposit into the Secretary of State Services Fund revenues generated from optional services offered in the normal course of business, including one-time or periodic sales of data by subscription or other contract business. And we are doing this currently through the Office of Professional Regulation. We're not charging for it. So I'm going to talk about that a little lower, but that's the one place where and there are other places where we have been asked to provide this data, and other states are charging for this data. And what we're talking about really is the creation of, I'm going to get the acronym wrong, as I always do anytime I'm trying to talk IT. I know just enough to get into trouble. So right now in the Office of Professional Regulation, we're providing SFTPs or FTPSs, which are secure file transfers. And we are moving towards an API. And we would like to have an API out of our Office of Professional Regulation system and our business services system. Those are the two places where entities, both corporations and third parties, have been asking for this data the most. And so what we're doing with our modification to 3 VSA 118 in the OPR bill is giving the Secretary the authority to create a policy to start charging for that. The building of those feeds is expensive, whether it's an API or not. And there's specific fields that different entities want. And the scope and breadth of what they're asking for is different. So we think a policy would be better than setting a fee in statute.
Rex Southworth.
So above the additional language that you're asking, kind of alludes to revenues collected.
Yes, all of it.
Does the Secretary of State currently sell information?
We do not.
Yeah, Office of Professional Regulation.
We do not. This, because we have felt like we've never had the authority to sell information before. So we're asking for the authority to sell information.
Okay, so there's no information currently sold.
But you're giving it away.
We're giving it away.
Right.
Okay. What kind of data is that?
So I'm gonna jump ahead so that I can answer that question specifically, because the one thing that we're doing it is the Office of Professional Regulations. And this is, we're pushing these files to 5 different entities, one to the National PT Association of the National Association of PT Boards, one to the National Association of Accountancy Boards, one to the National Association of Real Estate, one to the equivalent, it's called NURSES, it's the Nursing Federation, and then one to UVM. And this data, we have built feeds for all 5 of these entities specific to them, about, you know, who the people are, how they're licensed, the basis of their licensure, whether they came in by endorsement, exam, apprenticeship, their education, whether or not they passed an exam, and their current status, whether they have discipline pending against them or whether they're conditioned, warned, suspended, etc. All of these, the first issuance of their license, when their license expires, and if they have any specialties. So those are all data feeds that we're pushing out to those 5 entities right now. There are more that want that. For the associations, that's PT, accountancy, real estate, and nursing, they're creating huge data banks of all of the licensed nurses in the entire country. So they're getting this feed from every state and creating a huge data bank. We also have to report any discipline that we put on a nurse into that data bank, and other states are looking in that data bank to see whether we have disciplined a nurse and they're using it to make licensing decisions in Nebraska or South Dakota.
Rep. Southworth.
All of this information is public information
All of this information
and is on the public facing websites, correct?
all of this information is public information. All of it is not on the publicly facing
Okay.
websites. For the Office of Professional Regulation, for instance, I can tell you what is public. The name of the person, the profession type, the discipline, the first issuance, the effective date and the expiration date, and the specialties. We don't get into the basis of licensure on the external lookup, the education level, the exam level, and we only disclose discipline if somebody has been found to be disciplined.
Okay, so I guess my question comes down to if most of this information is available to them doing their own research, we're expending state dollars and time,
Yes.
basically, to provide it to them to know.
That's correct. That's why we're asking for authority to charge. Because, and that they, for instance, UBN has a very strong business case to get this data. They get a download of our data every morning. They compare it to who's going to be on the floor every day. They have their software system compares who's going to be on the floor with our data, so that they don't allow anyone with an expired license or a disciplined license work on the floor, because that exposes them to liability and reimbursement issues. So they do that comparison every day.
Has anyone ever challenged this information being given out?
No, it's all public information. If somebody asked me for a licensing file, I would have to give all of this information out. There's nothing that's protected in this information. It's just a consolidated. First of all, UVM we don't make all of that information public on our licensee lookup. But second of all, UVM, it would completely put us and UVM at a complete standstill to not provide this in a Excel like spreadsheet that they got every day that they could compare and contrast. I mean, it'd be untenable. We would not be able to provide it to them in a public records request type question.
So because this is all public, you have no authority to say, happy to give it to you, but you gotta pay us for a time. You just have to build the feed,
The way that we have interpreted it in the past is we did not have the authority to charge for that information feed. And that's why we're expressly asking the legislature for that authority so that we can create a policy. And the reason why we'd like to create a policy as opposed to set a fee in the statute, which we had originally tried, is it gets very complicated depending on the complexity of the feed and how often somebody wants it and the type of modifications that we need to make. So we thought it would be better to be set by policy than by a set, $2,500 a year.
Tori?
Yeah, I'm just curious. So, in your own licensing for monitors, people moving into the state, you're probably accessing the same data from another state.
That's correct.
So it's sort of a community.
Right.
Everybody wants to share this with each other.
For the first, for examples, the PTs, the accountants, the real estate is actually in federal law. We're mandated to do that because
Okay.
of the Freddie Mae, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac loan crisis. There's a lot more federal oversight of real estate appraisers than there was prior. So we're required to have this feed through them, through the AFC. But for the others, yeah, it's a sister state cooperation agreement that we have. And
Do we ever have to pay fees for accessing the information from other states?
we pay dues to those associations, as do all of our
So
sister
your
states.
dues give you access.
Yeah, that's correct. And it's really an important piece of how we ask for license verifications from other states if somebody's coming in. But this is a way to get up to date information. And for us to be able to provide up to date information. And since this committee first of all, you have a whole new jurisdiction, but also since this is not exactly your world, for nursing licensure, for instance, we license almost 20,000 licensees, nurses in the state. And we receive complaints about them. We investigate those complaints, and we have the ability to do a summary suspension, which means if we get information that there's a nurse who's diverting narcotics from the floor of a hospital, and we have the evidence to prove that he's been doing that, we will pursue a summary suspension, which means our prosecutors have to prove that there's an imminent threat to the health, safety, and welfare of Vermonters. And if that's found to be true, his license is summarily suspended that day. It's put into our system. It's shown in our system that his license is summarily suspended. But that's why UVM wants to know, because we are providing notice to the nurse and to whoever complained about the nurse when his license is suspended. But we do not provide notice to his employers because we don't know who's being employed by. And frequently, if you are found to be, let's say you were working at, Northeast Regional and you were diverting, you would be fired there, but you would just be looking for your next job and you could have gone to UVM. So in that time that we were doing our investigation, and that's actually really common, and also those folks move between states a lot. So we would put our summary suspension into our system, and then it feeds into nurses so that our sister states know that that man license was suspended, and also UVM would know that man's license was suspended.
Okay.
Question?
Oh, sorry, Brett Campbell.
Lauren, you said this, but I didn't catch it. What is FSBPT again?
That's a different type of secure file transfer. It's there's two different. I don't know both acronyms, but both of them are secure ways to transfer files.
Oh no, this is a data feed recipient.
Oh, that is the PTs.
Physical therapists?
Physical therapists, yes.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, I thought you were talking about FTPS.
Yeah.
So many acronyms.
So many acronyms. Rep. Kleckner.
In your example of someone who was diverting stuff off the floor, UVM's going to know they shouldn't let that person on the floor, but will the other hospitals in the state?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we don't have a data feed to them. Other hospitals have reached out to us to ask for that. I know that Rutland Regional has, and we've talked about it with them, but there's a lot of work for our IT developers to do this. And so I think we should have a standard API that all of the hospitals can pay for on a per capita, per patient basis. That's part of the policy that I'd like for us to be able to create is how wide is your audience? How many, I want there to be some equity involved in the policy. There are differences between Copley and UVM Health Network. They probably shouldn't have to pay the same, but they both need the.
I'm sorry, follow-up question.
That's okay, yeah.
Did you not say you were developing an API?
We are in the process of developing an API.
Thank you.
Yeah, Rep. Southworth.
So wouldn't it make a lot of sense to develop portal where they pay a subscription fee, and they have a secure login to go and do their own checking, rather than the state having to put all the resources into doing it.
I don't think that would work for their business purposes, because really what they want to do is have their system be able to talk to our system to do an auto cross-reference, so that their system and our system, our API would come in and go better than that, and go through their system and find the anomalies. And they don't want a human to have to do a search of it. I mean, UVM Health Network probably employs 15,000 of our licensees on any given day, because we're talking about nurses, PTs, social workers, rad techs, it's quite a few osteopathic physicians. There's audiologists. I mean, we regulate the majority of UVM's workforce.
I just thought it would be more beneficial to have it statewide, where all your medical facilities would be able to do that, rather than like Representative Kleppner said, the UVM will know, but that hospital won't.
That is our goal. It would be to create a standard API that people could, click. I want this field and this field and this field for these professions, 53 professions, right? So, and then that API would push the information to the entity that asked for that API, that's customized to their needs. And we'd like to be recouped our costs for that, because it's building it has a cost, but invariably with technology, something will change or break, and then we'll have to fix the API because the API will be down. So we need to build it not only for the immediate, but for the duration of time, so that it can continue to be available. And I do think this is a really important resource, certainly for our hospitals and for our sister regulatory entities. We also have been asked to create this in our business services world. And we would like to create an API in the business services. People want an API, for instance, of all of our UCC filings, our Uniform Commercial Code filings. So that's where there's a loan on a piece of property. And that's filed so that banks and individuals know that my car does not belong to me. It belongs to the bank that I financed it through. And there will be a claim on my car at our office until I pay off the car. And then the car will revert to me. So that's a classic example.
Oh, Scott, Rep Campbell.
I already asked my question, sorry.
A legacy hand. Rep Tory?
So you mentioned this desire for the authority to do a policy, is in the OPR bill.
It is in the OPR.
And then would the policy itself get developed by you in rulemaking?
I think what we are planning to do is to do it as a policy, not rulemaking, but engaging with stakeholders, so that it can be monitored.
So the legislature wouldn't be involved.
That's correct. That's why we're asking for the authority. Obviously, you could have us come in and talk about our policy at any time, but
How do you sense that's doing over on the Senate side? Going
we have
well?
heard no problems.
Okay.
Yes, it's going well.
Great.
I think that we have I did say so myself. I think we have a compelling narrative that we should be compensated for this work. It's not insignificant. And if we want to build it correctly through APIs, which is what we should be doing now, then we need to have resources to be able to support that. In business services, it's a little bit easier because that's funded through business fees, which are easier to use, I would say, but licensing fees and charging more people to compensate for third-party needs for data feeds does not feel appropriate. And I think the policy makes a lot of sense.
Jumping back to business services, why would someone want the actual images of the forms?
So that they can put them into their system, so they have a true and accurate record of the record.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So not just relying on how it was pulled.
Exactly. And right now, we are pushing that through a bulk data download, which is updated once a week. So people can download that, but it's updated. I forget which day it's updated, but it's only kept, it's evergreen on one day or 1 hour. Whereas an API would be evergreen at any moment you got it. And that would be the beauty of an API out of these systems, is that folks would have the most up-to-date information when they came in. Anything?
Yeah.
I was thinking, do you contract with ADS to produce the API, or who creates it?
Yeah, we do not contract with ADS to make the API. That's a lot of acronyms right there. We have third-party vendors that build all of our systems, so we're doing that through our vendors. That doesn't mean that we couldn't in the future use ADS. We have been using ADS more for support of our systems, but we don't have any systems in-house right now. Just thinking, we don't have any systems in-house right now that are built by ADS. That's really not the model of ADS anymore, but also that's not, our business needs are bigger than something that could be built in-house by ADS. I say that with deference to the work that they do, but I don't think that they could build any of our systems. They don't have the capacity to do that.
So you'd have to go after RFP there.
We already have the vendors on contract, and for both of the vendors where we need to create an API, this work is in scope. We have planned to do APIs for a long time. This is not new work. It's just more expensive, and we need to do it. And we haven't done it yet. Our current vendor for the Office of Professional Regulation, we have worked with them quite extensively on creating this data feed sharing that we currently have, but we need to move to an API. I was also asked to talk a little bit about elections. There is an export of the statewide voter checklist. You can ask for that. You have to submit an affidavit that you'll only use it for non-commercial purposes and will not disclose it to the foreign governments. And you can also do a report of absentee ballots. Again, that's an on-demand request. We don't provide that publicly. You have to ask for it, and then we provide it. And those folks, there's lots of people who are asking for both of those reports. Primarily, it's candidates, political parties, PACs, etc., and research entities.
It seems as though if you were the kind of person who was going to disclose our voter checklist to a foreign government, an affidavit wouldn't have a whole lot of.
Yeah.
I can't agree with you more, but that is what is in the statute, so that's what we do.
Huh. Are you guys getting AI requests, like, bot requests? We've been hearing from folks that they're starting to get like mass generated, very obvious AI created public records requests or data requests.
I think we've effectively made it difficult to do that. So we have to, the way that we get public records requests through a form on our website that might be difficult for an AI bot to do. I see every records request that comes into our office. I haven't seen one that looks like it's from a bot. I will say that our systems are getting, pinged all the time. I don't think we're unique in that for information. Somebody's trying I've been thinking about it. I've been thinking about security as, there's the difference between someone trying the door handle to see whether they can open the door versus having a crowbar to see whether they can pry open the door. We have a lot of people knocking on our door, trying the door handle that are clearly bots. But in terms of records requests, no, we haven't seen that. Now, that doesn't mean that there could be somebody who's running a script on any of our websites to download, like go through and click and get these Excel downloads. It's possible that someone has written a script to do that. If you would just have to go to our website, the script would have to say, click on this button, and then this button, and then this button, and then click download. That could be happening, but I don't know about that.
Is the form on your website, you said the form might do a good job at blocking this out. Is that something specially designed or just have CAPTCHA or something on it or what?
The records request.
Yeah, records request.
I think you have to handwrite details of what you're asking for.
Okay.
So you have to fill out your name and your contact information and then a detailed request. We don't have like boxes that you can click for what type of records we're looking for in our public records process,
Right.
which is different than the data that we're providing through our systems.
Mm-hmm.
So I just thought of a question. I have nothing.
Yeah.
Lauren, on the voter checklist information, exported a report of absentee ballots requests for state and federal elections is shared with anybody who requests it. But since we send all absentee ballots to every voter, how does that work now?
So what you're talking about is we have a distinction between an absentee voter ballot, which is really operational in the presidential primary and the statewide primary. We don't call the November ballot that we mail to everybody an absentee ballot. That is a universal vote by mail ballot.
Okay.
So an absentee ballot means the election is otherwise conducted in person, but you're asking for a ballot to be mailed to you, and that's the presidential primary and the statewide primary. The universal vote by mail election, the November election, some people do refer to them as absentee ballots colloquially, but that's not an absentee ballot from our perspective. That's a universal vote by mail ballot.
Okay, so it's only the general elections that get the universal ballots.
That's correct. That's the way the law is now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good reasons why we should move the other elections to universal vote by mail. I'd be happy to talk about it, but outside.
Yeah, different committee. Thanks.
Yeah, different committee. Okay.
You keep track of the March elections, town elections that aren't primary years, the other 3 years?
So towns get to choose whether or not they use our Vermont election management system. Quite a few do, and they input their data into the election management system. Some do not, but it's their choice on whether or not they use our system.
So
For their local elections, not for presidential primary or statewide or general.
right, but so when town clerks are entering newly registered voters, and I would think most newly registered voters come by motor voter registration,
Correct.
that they have continuous access to this checklist database for finding out where voters may have been previously registered to vote. And then
Right. You are touching on something that happens in the election space, which is that we do have sharing between our office and the DMV, and also through the Electronic Registration Information Center, otherwise known as ERIC, which is an organization that we're part of. Both of those, we feed into them, they feed into us. ERIC in particular takes all the data from its member states, we're a member state, to compare, has a voter moved across state lines, there's notification to us if someone's coming from Florida, or if somebody has moved to Florida, like a Vermonter has registered to vote in Florida, we're notified, so that voter comes off of our voter checklist. They also do comparisons with death records. They provide a lot of data to us, and we provide data to them. That's through a member agreement that we have with them. With DMV, we also have an MOU, and that's that their data comes into our system, their registration data comes in. And then I think there's very limited data that feeds back to them from us. They're really the primary source of data into us. And that's because of automatic voter registration. When you get a real ID or a enhanced driver's license, when you get a driver's privilege card, we do not get that data because you're not eligible to vote because you haven't shown lawful status citizenship. When you apply for a real ID, you could be applying on the basis of your lawful status or citizenship. We only get registrations from those who say they are a citizen and can prove they're a citizen at the DMV level. Again, it's not really, and the DMV, just because it's been talked about so much, the DMV doesn't verify that you are a citizen, but they verify that you have lawful status, and you have to self-attest that you are a citizen. And they have your birth certificate or your passport or something that would be good indicia that you are a citizen. But you also can be a lawful green card holder and get a real ID. And you would not be able to attest that you're a citizen, and you would not be automatically registered to vote, and we would not receive your data. And then we have in Vermont, we're one of 5 states that have the enhanced driver's license, which is verification of citizenship done by DMV, allows me, I have one, to cross the Canadian border without a passport, and is proof of citizenship.
Yeah.
There's federal statute that they're talking about in the news.
Yeah.
Going to be, you have to have it.
The SAVE Act, yes.
And do you remember what year that SAVE Act was passed?
It has not passed yet.
Oh, that's the act that's in.
It has not passed. It is, it was discussed last year. It's passed the House this year. It's going on to the Senate. Hopefully, Senate's going to really debate it. It has huge ramifications for Vermont, and President Trump did issue an executive order, and we're part of a lawsuit with other sister states fighting the executive order. But the SAVE Act has really big ramifications, first and foremost for voters, because it would require you to show your birth certificate, and if your name has changed for any reason since you were born, then you would have to show documentation of why your name changed. So that would be a certified copy of your birth certificate. For the majority of women, it's a certified copy of your marriage license. If you were adopted, it's a certified copy of your adoption record. If you changed your name, it would be a certified copy of that court record, unless you had a passport. And that is the majority of Vermonters do not have passports or a real ID. You could have a real ID. Not a real ID, an enhanced driver's license. A real ID would not work. An enhanced driver's license would. But if you think through how much work it would take to get a certified copy of your birth certificate and your marriage license, that's not insignificant.
It has to be a certified copy.
It would have to be a certified copy to show that it's real, right, and authentic, because we would be asking town clerks to verify that the birth certificate is real. And birth certificates do not have a standard format, even within the state of Vermont until recently, and do not, and certainly nationwide do not have a standard format. So, my birth certificate, I was born in Vermont. My birth certificate looks nothing like our birth certificate that I only have one child who was born here. I have another child who was born in New York. All 3 of our birth certificates look dramatically different from each other. And my son who was born in Vermont and I who was born in Vermont, I was born in 1977. It looks like somebody had a typewriter in East Topsom, and that is exactly what happened. There was a typewriter in East Topsom. It doesn't look very official. So I would have to provide a certified copy of my birth certificate.
So I thought we were going,
Yeah.
so I thought the real ID was the standard that everybody was going to, and that wouldn't be acceptable. What's the difference between enhanced and real?
The real ID, so the way the executive order is written and the way that the SAVE Act is written is that you have to show documents that are compliant with real ID. But real ID does not show citizenship, because real ID is issued to Vermonters who have legal lawful status here, but are not citizens. So someone who has a green card or has a specific work visa, they have legal status. They're authorized to be here. They would show that authorization to be here to DMV, and DMV would issue them a real ID. But that is different than the enhanced ID, which is only given to United States citizens and can be used to cross borders. The real ID cannot be used to cross the Canadian border. It can be used to fly domestic. But you would need an enhanced ID to drive across the border, and you would need a passport to fly internationally.
So data wise, we're years away before, I registered to vote in Vermont in '88. And probably I didn't have to give a driver's license or the last four digits of my social security number. Or, matter of fact, I had a person with the same name, a relative with the same first name that got dropped from the voter registration because he moved to Burlington. The second cousin moved to Burlington. And
Yeah.
so I guess the question would be, when did we add last four of your social security or a driver's license number to the voter registration?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I might be able to find that, but
But no, it's not really important, but it's the correlation of
I think-
duplicate
I think
people.
the core issue when it comes to the SAVE Act, and I don't want to go too far afield into this.
I was just gonna start reeling us back in.
The core issue is that there's not a national agency that issues citizenship identification, and we don't have a way to get a feed of that, which would be ideal. Or for somebody, there's not a way for somebody to have a card. Like, we don't all have a citizenship card. There could be that, but social security cards do not do it. Real ID, driver's licenses do not do it. In order to implement any of these requirements, we would have to have the certified copy of the real original documents, and to take it back into the IT space, we would have to make a modification to our IT system to upload those documents, because the requirements are that we keep a copy and keep those secure. And that has an incredible cost to the state that we just are starting to contemplate.
Madam Chair, I thought our purpose here was the information that is dispersed from the state, not just the Secretary of State's office, but primarily the big cat holder. They have the voter registration, the DMV has the other.
Yep, and so we're here today from the Secretary of State, and then we've got DMV coming in tomorrow. Or this in a couple days. So back to the data that Secretary of State holds and shares. Where are we in your testimony?
I believe I've touched on every single piece of my filed testimony and what I was prepared to talk about. We jumped around.
Great.
We went right.
Did we finish that last little bit? Visara, we talked about.
We did
that.
talk about at the beginning. Those are,
Yeah.
That's the administrative rulemaking process.
Okay, where we have the proposed rules that people can comment on and see, and then we have the LexisNexis for finalized rules.
That's correct.
Yeah, Rep. Southworth and then Kleppner.
Is the Secretary of State's office aware of any other agency besides agency or department beside DMV that sells that?
I'm not aware of any. I can speak for myself. I'm not aware of any, and I don't believe that we've been asked about it
Okay,
in recent years.
thank you.
Rep. Kleppner.
So it sounds like, public information, someone's gonna figure out some clever way just to automate the process and grab all the records and have a mailing list that they will sell to a data broker.
That is correct. That is how.
Yeah, they'll do whatever they want with it. Non-public information, it sounds like, you don't sell that, and you are making every effort to ensure that no one else can scrape it and sell it. Is that accurate?
That is correct. So if I could just answer with an example a little bit.
Sure.
So we get asked through the Office of Professional Regulation through the public records request process. We have a roster of all licensed architects. And you can download the roster of all licensed architects. And in our roster, our publicly facing roster, we do not have people's email addresses, but previously, under the Public Records Act, we have determined that we have everybody's email addresses, we have everybody's telephone numbers. We've decided under as policy that we do not disclose telephone numbers as a result of a public records request. Because there's a provision in the public records that says you cannot disclose information that could be used to harass or annoy. And we have determined that telephone numbers could qualify as that. So when somebody asks for a roster of all of our licensees, architects, their telephone numbers and emails, we have said we can give you the email, but not the telephone number. We do not provide the email externally. We have to do a marrying of data internally to provide that roster. That being said, we have moved in another bill, S-48, which is the reproductive protection bill, a public records request, a modification to the Public Records Act that allows us to withhold telephone numbers and emails for licensees. That's for all licensees in the state, not just OPR. Because there is a section in the Public Records Act that requires us to keep a list of licensees as public. That's why we have the roster of all the architects and all the massage therapists and all the veterinarians. That's because it's a public record. It's in the public records law, and it's easier for us than having to recreate that every time to have that be something that anyone can download on demand. We do not believe that you should be able to request and this has been our position for a while. We just haven't had the legal basis to deny it. That you should be able to get a list of every architect's email address, because those 100% are being used for commercial gain. And we've asked to have that expressly prohibited from us being disclosing it, and that has moved. Well. And so that's in S-48, which I believe has passed both bodies.
I don't know. Rep Southworth?
Has there ever been any follow-up on public records requests to ensure that the information that was asked for and received isn't being used for what other than what was stated on the form?
We don't ask why you're asking for the information. I don't think we have the authority to ask what you're going to use the information for outside of that one specific space in elections where we provide the voter checklist.
Wow.
And we receive lots of records requests for a whole variety of reasons, but I don't know of any state agency that asks, why are you asking for this record? We have the authority to ask if somebody can limit their request. We sometimes get requests that we've had many where we have to disclose any record that we have or have created that has the word Trump in it. Well, I mean, people use the word Trump colloquially, right? Like that trumps this, or and so we'll ask, like, are you looking for a specific time frame? Can we limit it to the president's name versus how people use it colloquially? We try and limit those, and we are in discussion with the requester on how we can limit the scope of their request. But I've been overseeing public records requests in one capacity or another for the Secretary of State's office since 2017, and we have never asked why you're asking for it. I don't know that. I think that would be seen as a chilling effect. I'm not sure that I would advocate for us to be able to ask why you're requesting the data or information. That's different. I just want to say that's different than somebody who's asking for an API. I do think we should be able to ask, how are you going to use this data, and have an agreement between us and the party on how the data is going to be used, because they would be paying us for it and we would be providing certain fields. I think we would want there to be an agreement on how that data was going to be used and what they would do to secure that data. Again, to be developed in our policy, but just thinking of something that we would have to navigate in developing that. And I know that we have those agreements with the 5 entities that we currently provide the data from OPR to.
Any other questions? the Deputy Secretary of State. I couldn't remember if it was assistant or deputy.
I'll go by and you can just call me Lauren.
Great. Well, Jack.